This is the Daily Tech News for Thursday, January 16th. We tell you what you need to know, follow up on the context of stories, and help each other understand.
Today, we'll hear from Tony Wang on using RedNote for 5 years and your emails.
I'm Jason Howell.
I'm Huyen Dow.
Hey, let's start with what you need to know with a big story. The Nintendo Switch 2. It's suddenly becoming a lot more real with a video shared by Nintendo this morning that shows the new console pieced together bit by bit with what I would call personally an ASMR fan's dream soundtrack. It's very clicky and stuff. Without revealing any specifications, the video does show a number of upgrades, and I've got them all for you, so buckle up. The new console looks very similar to the original Nintendo Switch, with a screen that is definitely larger than before. It kind of grows on screen. With the holistic design approach of the Switch series, as we've seen with the first one, that also means that the Joy-Cons are a bit larger as well to fit the body. And speaking of the Joy-Cons, they appear now to click into the base of the console instead of what you got on the first one where they slid into place. Leaks also suggest that magnets might be employed to get them to stay in place. So we'll look for that when it happens. A new unspecified button has appeared on the Joy-Con controller underneath the home button. We'll see what that means, but no word right now. The SL and SR shoulder buttons actually appear to be stretched out a bit further, which makes sense because they got a little larger, the Joy-Cons. There also appears to be a flat tabletop accessory, which is interesting, that the Joy-Con sits in to turn it into what appears to be a mouse-type controller. Some rumors had pointed to that. So, they allude to it in the video. We'll see what that means going forward once we have more information. As for connectivity, the new console adds an additional USB-C port up to the top of the device, right next to the headphone jack. And I'm imagining that probably makes charging while playing a bit more flexible. You can do it from the front or the back. The device also gets an updated U-shaped kickstand on the back. The dock, very familiar. It does get some updates, rounded out the edges a little bit, also being larger to fit the increased size of the console. The new console, according to the video, is set to release sometime in 2025. The Nintendo site shows that more information will be shared on April 2nd in a Nintendo Direct presentation with a hands-on event scheduled in New York, Los Angeles, and Dallas throughout the month of April. And finally, the video shows what appears to be a new Mario Kart game. I mean, it seems like it's going to be a new Mario Kart game. I don't know why they'd put Mario Kart on the screen if it wasn't for a new game on the new console, but maybe it's the old game because Nintendo has confirmed backwards compatibility with physical and digital Switch games mostly. The video does say that certain titles may not be supported. How are you feeling about a Switch 2, Win? Were you a fan of the original? And what do you think?
I was. I'm really looking forward to it. It's been, I think the original was released, in 2017? And I really do think that it was an amazing, introduction to both that hybrid handheld gaming and console, kind of like that dual purpose device. So I'm excited. I think the biggest thing that I think a lot of us that still enjoy the Switch is that it is 7 years old, so a bit long in the tooth. So it does feel about time for the Nintendo Switch 2, especially to compete with all the other handhelds that have come out since 2017 that have kind of taken advantage of the space that the Switch OG created. So yeah. I'm excited. And yeah, that click is extremely satisfying in the trailer. That little it's nice.
I mean,
nice.
If you're listening to that trailer in headphones, you either love it or hate it, because some people just hate the ASMR kind of like ultra crisp, up close sounds, that sort of stuff. I know my daughter would probably love that thing. I think what occurred to me when I was looking at the design refresh is how little of a refresh it actually is. And in the world of, which is not to say that there's not meaningful upgrades, it's definitely upgraded, but in the world of gaming consoles, I always feel like we're so used to the next consoles looking so different from the previous ones to set themselves apart. And yet the Switch 2 really, by all accounts, according to the video, could easily be confused with the original Switch to someone who doesn't know these things really well or hasn't played them before. They might not look at the new one and think, oh, that's the new Switch. I've got to have that. It's like they stayed so close to the design of the original. And I don't know, am I wrong? Is that different from what we usually see in the video game world?
I think it depends. Like, I think, especially with a Nintendo, and this is my understanding, I was a former gamer. I don't know if my qualifications or my licensing is still valid for my gamingness, but I've always thought of Nintendo as not necessarily like the power gaming company, like you think of like Sony or Xbox, but as the fun, slightly weird sometimes, but like the fun, joyful company. And so it is a little bit of a surprise. And again, it was part of that joyfulness and that kind of uniqueness that introduced the OG Switch to begin with. But I also think it makes a lot of sense. I feel like the Switch 2 is like the little more grown-up version of the OG Switch, better specs, a little more practical with like, say, the kickstand and the USB-C charging. And I think it makes sense just because it feels like Nintendo has had some ups and downs in the the last decade or so, and that maybe being a little bit safe is going to work for them since people already love the form factor. And there's certain things about the Switch that I think are extra special over like a lot of the other handhelds, even like the Steam Deck. So I think it makes sense. If anything, it's a surprise that it's not surprising, but it is a little bit, I'd say, unusual for Nintendo for sure, for it to be kind of safe, not safe. Safe feels like a negative word in this case, but familiar, like familiar.
Yeah, that's that. I think that's the right word to go with too, and that's not a bad thing because the Switch, by all accounts, was a very successful console platform for Nintendo and in the gaming space. And I imagine this is going to do really well. I really applaud them for doing the backwards compatibility.
Yes.
That always felt like a slap in the face when you didn't have backwards compatibility. And so I'm really happy to see that most of the old catalog will work on the new console.
It definitely will make it easier for people to shell out money for a new console as long as some of their games work. So yeah, 100%. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Daily Tech News Show Live is made possible by its listeners, thanks to all of you, including Jeffrey Zilks, Alo Adam L, Tony Glass, and new patrons Lo Nanjang, Robert, David, and Al Fallis.
There is more we need to know today, so why don't we get right into the briefs?
The incoming presidential administration is exploring the use of an executive order to delay enforcement of a law requiring ByteDance to sell TikTok or face a nationwide ban in the U.S. by January 19th. This, of course, would happen only after the inauguration on January 20th. Meanwhile, the outgoing administration is looking into ways to keep TikTok operational despite the looming ban deadline. Officials share that they aren't looking to defer enforcement, but rather seek options to avoid a sudden shutdown, as many anticipate. The Supreme Court is expected to rule on TikTok's challenge to the law, while legal experts largely believe the law will proceed as planned.
I mean, it's such a confusing thing. Like, do you want it to stay or do you want it to go? I just don't even know anymore.
It's so frustrating because even the outgoing administration is like, we still want to do that thing, but maybe not. So like, it's just, yes.
We changed our mind, but kind of sort of changed our mind. Related to all of this is the migration that we talked about this week of users from TikTok to another Chinese social media app, RedNote. Sensor Tower estimates U.S. downloads of the app were up 200% year over year this week, 194% for the week before. So getting a lot of new users. A source close to Xiaohongshu told Reuters, and by the way, that's the parent company, told Reuters the company had seen nearly 750,000 new users in just 2 recent days. RedNote was so caught by surprise, in fact, that they began scrambling to devise ways to moderate English language content on the platform and build translation tools. And speaking of translation tools, along those lines, Duolingo is reporting a sudden 216% increase in U.S. users looking to learn Mandarin, attributed in large part to the influx of users to RedNote. Duolingo has latched onto this trend, actually taking to social media to promote its Mandarin courses and targeting, quote, TikTok refugees. Duolingo saw an increase of 36% in U.S. App Store downloads just this month. And I don't know, pretty fascinating thing that I guess a lot of people probably didn't see that coming, that RedNote would suddenly be a contender.
It's just so funny because the whole point of this ban was kind of like fear of, Chinese, like the Chinese state espionage and things like that. And then, it's like from the frying pan into the fire in a sense. But I do love, and we've seen another mass social media migration last year with Bluesky and X, formerly known as Twitter, the social media network formerly known as Twitter. So I just think these are just fascinating case studies. Go Duolingo for taking advantage.
Yeah, right place, right time as far as that's concerned. I do 100%. Think that a large part of this they're attributing to people kind of thumbing their nose at the whole situation, saying, oh yeah, well then I'm going to go over there anyways. Make sure to stick around for Tom's chat with Tony Wang, a 5-year user of RedNote and actually a friend of mine later in the show.
A Canalys report shows that Apple's iPhone sales in China fell in all 4 quarters of 2024, including a 25% drop in the last quarter of the year, resulting in a market share of 15% for the year in total. Vivo took the lead in the Chinese market with a 17% share, and Huawei is hot on its tail with 16%. Apple was the only company of the 5 named specifically that saw an annual drop in sales year over year. Canalys attributes the drop to, quote, intensified competition from domestic brands, if that is not the case.
Yeah, we definitely talk about those domestic brands and their competitive devices often on Android Faithful. So
we do.
Yeah, I think it's right.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. Supreme Court looks to be in support of a Texas law requiring age verification for online pornography access. Justices appeared sympathetic to the law, which aims to protect minors from readily accessible explicit content online. They could, however, send it back to the lower court to further hash out whether laws like these impede on the First Amendment. Critics of the law, like the Free Speech Coalition, argue that the law could apply more broadly to artistic or non-explicit educational content, as well as raise privacy risks for adults who would be required to supply personal identification or biometric data for access. Meanwhile, UK regulator Ofcom issued long-awaited guidance on user age verification that would impact not only sites with pornographic content, but also social media platforms, among who knows what else. Techniques including requiring photo ID, facial age estimation, credit card checks, just among other methods that they listed for users in the UK by July of this year. So you could see that coming very soon. Ofcom stated that these checks might prevent younger users from accessing social media sites at all. And that's just kind of the way it would have to be.
Bluesky is working with the developer of Skeets, Berlin-based Sebastian Vogelsang, on a new photo sharing app called Flashes. So the app is being built on the AT protocol, which is the same foundational technology as Bluesky. The app is expected to feature photo posts of up to 4 images, as well as short videos up to 1 minute. Those posts will integrate into the Bluesky timeline with comment syncing between them and will also support direct messages. Flashes is expected to launch in the coming weeks, with a beta arriving even sooner.
Nice. I like seeing the Bluesky ecosystem broaden out and expand.
Samesies. Yeah.
Motorola announced a few new budget smartphones. The Moto G Power is a $300 device, both IP68 and IP69 certified. I think we're onto a trend right now. The OnePlus 13 also had that. With a 6.8-inch FHD Plus LCD 120 hertz display, 5,000 milliamp hour battery with wireless charging, powered by a MediaTek Dimensity 6300 chipset and 8 gigs of RAM. So that one's $300. Then you've got the $200 Moto G IP52 water repellent certification, a slightly smaller 6.7-inch LCD display, no wireless charging on board, and the same MediaTek chip, but with less RAM, 4 gigs. Look for the Moto G to launch January 30th, and the Power hits February 6th.
Xiaomi officially entered the South Korean market yesterday, a major milestone for the company. The Xiaomi 14T and Redmi Note 14 Pro 5G are the first 2 devices to be sold in the country. With other devices from Xiaomi's vast catalog of tech to follow, South Koreans should see TVs, wearables, and robot vacuums sometime in February.
Xiaomi has their hands in so many different things. So there you go. And finally, LG Display unveiled its 4th generation OLED TV panels this week. A major upgrade over the previous generation. The new panels are 33% brighter at 4,000 nits, energy efficient on the 65-inch panel, for example, 20% higher energy efficiency. And they tout a new ultra-low reflection coating. Now, much of this is possible due to a, quote, primary RGB tandem structure that enhances light output and improves color purity.
All right, those are the essentials for today. Let's dive a little deeper in the ongoing stories and follow up.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, millions of TikTok users have been installing a Chinese app called RedNote in case TikTok goes away in the US on Sunday, literally right around the corner. Tom Merritt sat down with someone who's been using the app for more than 5 years now about what it feels like to have all these new users from his perspective.
I'm talking with Tony Wang, freelance producer and a friend of mine, Asian correspondent. Tony, is that cool? Can we?
Yes, that is 100% accurate. Yeah.
How long have you been using RedNote?
I would say about 5 years, going on 6 years now.
Okay, and when did it start referring to itself as RedNote?
I got a software update last week, and it turned to RedNote, and it was it caught me off guard because when I downloaded the app way back when, I had to search for the app name in Chinese to get the app to show up in my search. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was under its Chinese name until this week when it suddenly became referred to as RedNote. And as I understand it, the Chinese name would translate more as Little Red Book, right?
Yes, 100% directly. Yes.
Okay. So just to give people a little idea of the background, why did you download it 5 years ago?
Oh, so my wife is Chinese as well, and she actually has been using it. The Little Red Book was created as a competitor to Instagram in China, and it's actually been around since like 2013. So
okay.
Yeah.
Even though you're in the U.S., you were able to see more Chinese content because you can't use Instagram in China, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And go ahead.
There's actually some functionality that's not in the app that I wasn't able to access and use, and then I think that has been changed since then. So. Okay.
So you're using this mostly as somewhat of a niche app, the way some people would use an app like KakaoTalk or something. Like it's maybe not used worldwide, but you can use it for a specific region or a specific purpose. And then I guess this week suddenly somehow everyone decided that if TikTok was going to go away in the US, they would all start using RedNote, and RedNote must have been in on it because they changed the name to an English name, but the controls are not in English, right?
I'm not sure because I had to go in and actually change my user setting to English so I can go through and actually use the app. It's been a really weird turns of events right now. I mean, I saw Kevin Bacon yesterday on there, and my first reaction was, is this the real Kevin Bacon?
Yeah.
And then Pedro Pascal showed up, and I was like, I'm so confused because I've been using this app mainly for either entertainment or actually there's a very small group, I would say thousands of Asian Americans in America using this. And they actually talk about living their life in America as Asian American. Mm-hmm. And there's even parents on there. A couple of people I follow on there actually give out tips and deals on Costco. They'll be like, hey, go check out these Korean barbecue ribs at Costco. They're on sale this week. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is what Asian Americans were using this social media for. And now it's I'm not sure what's happening. I mean, I certainly hope it doesn't turn into TikTok where, it draws attention from the government and then there's going to be some repercussion from there.
Yeah, it's like you have a favorite bar, and then suddenly it gets written up in the newspaper, and a bunch of people show up, and changes the nature of the bar, right?
Yeah,
yeah. When did you start noticing people flooding in?
Monday.
So something must have happened over the weekend, I guess.
Yes, yeah. I think once they I'm pretty sure their developer noticed an influx of downloads from the US, and then they made some updates to the app. Yeah.
What kinds of so you're a longtime user, and I think this is interesting because people like my wife has signed up now because everybody's signing up, and she's seeing a lot of other people coming from TikTok because that's who she is. But what kinds of things are you seeing that's different from what you normally see?
So I started using it. I got hooked to the platform because how good the algorithm was, and I compared it to Instagram. I compared it to TikTok, and there's something a little bit different about RedNote. I'm not sure what they're doing, but it's more effective, I think, in that sense. And so what I've seen now is because I clicked on two videos, I clicked on Pedro and I clicked on Kevin. Now my feed is completely flushed, 100% American content, and it's so now it's like I'm not sure what it's doing to my algorithm, but I've already seen people in China complaining about this influx. And I even saw a Chinese creator on there ready to teach TikTok refugees Chinese. And that's just within 24 hours. And I was just shocked at how fast everybody adapted to the platform.
Yeah, that is impressive, how quickly people adapt. Neither one of us know where this is going, whether this is a flash in the pan or whether it becomes the new thing. I know ByteDance would like everyone to go to Lemon 8 with a number 8. They've been advertising that on TikTok, but it seems like the TikTok users have their own mind and have gone to RedNote for now. As a user of RedNote, what would you like to see happen? Do you want everybody to just go away and it go back to normal? Would you like to see it just calm down? Are you okay with it changing? How do you feel about it?
I think we're probably past that point. We're past the point of no return now. And I think I'm hoping that the algorithm would be able to cope with this influx of completely different content and people coming from different walks of life.
Yeah. You think it's probably here to stay and hopefully they can balance things out.
Yeah. I mean, the only way I see this changing would be if the RedNote goes the way of TikTok, where the government steps in and actually.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And starts the clock, because it's a 9-month period, I think, or something from the moment they identify it. But we don't even know what's going to happen to TikTok at this point. So
yeah, I know.
We'll see what happens to RedNote. Last question: any tips for a new RedNote user as a longtime RedNote user?
Be careful what you click on, because it really trains your algorithm. So if you don't like the content you're seeing, just scroll past it. You will see something that you like. Yeah.
Any etiquette that specifically you'd like people to adhere to? I
saw this TikToker that I'm not familiar with, but apparently he's really big on TikTok, and he used a filter that translated instantly from English to Chinese.
Okay. And
I watched this video last night, and he was speaking, and the translation was in his voice, but in Chinese, which was really amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So would you recommend that? It was good?
Yeah, it was. I want to go try it later.
Okay. Yeah. We'll have to figure out which translation app he was using it. Tony, thanks so much for chatting with me about this. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right. And after the interview, Tony followed up to let us know that the app that translates from English to Chinese with your voice in RedNote is actually HeyGen, which is a separate thing from RedNote. And so thank you for that, Tony. That was awesome. Appreciate it.
Have a thought about something on the show but don't know our email address? Here it is. Email us feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com.
All right, we end every episode of DTNS with some shared wisdom. Today, Martin and Chip both had the same idea for TikTok. Here's Chip's version.
Hey, DTNS crew, simple email here. Why doesn't TikTok just make a web app? Wouldn't that circumvent the law, or would that still count as distribution? I know you're not legal experts, but it is something I haven't heard discussed much. Love the new format. Keep up the great work. Chip from frigid Boston.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean, what we've been talking about, up until now has been the fact that like it's not as if the app suddenly stops working for anyone who has it installed. It's just that you won't be able to get the app anymore, which tells me that there is no active blocking that I know of TikTok on like a network perspective. So that's true. Why not just load it up on a web page or, launch it in a web app? I suppose that would work.
Yeah, this is again also just not my purview, but I also wonder whether there could be something to that. I mean, similarly, there is content blocking, like that. Of course, whenever you get like a VPN ad on your favorite content of choice on the internet, that's kind of one of the reasons, one of like the purported usages is to kind of circumvent content blocks. And it doesn't seem like that's like an issue with TikTok. It's just literally distribution. So yeah, I mean, thing is like with a web app, I mean, like that's a really good question. It's not a small load, but it could be a solution. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't tried to use TikTok in a web browser on my smartphone. I don't know how, because some apps and services do okay when you use it in a browser on your mobile device versus the app where you just get a better experience. I mean, I think what makes none of this matter whatsoever is if TikTok just in turn with the ban shuts it down entirely in the US, which I believe I saw some sort of headlines pointing to that as a possibility, which I think is more of a negotiation tactic than anything. But if that happens, you might not be able to get to it through a web browser either, unless you're using a VPN, right?
Yeah. Although I did just have a thought that, there actually is a lot in terms of TikTok. It's like, it's not just a kind of social media kind of content serving app. It's also a content creation app. There's a pretty decent video editor on TikTok for both, all the platforms. So that actually would be kind of difficult to do through a web app just because with the web, you're a bit disconnected from the kind of more lower level hardware stuff that would make video editing and capture really easy. So that might be a reason why companies like TikTok tend to focus on their mobile apps just because, again, it's a more kind of full service shop, vid content creation and content distribution. So there's probably a valid reason there for a degradation in experience if you kind of went with a web-based version. But that's just me speculating a little bit.
I imagine that you're probably right. A more robust kind of ability to work with these tools with camera and video capture and overlaying graphics and imagery and everything, doing that all inside of the browser. It's not that it's impossible, but it would probably be a challenge.
For sure. Ooh.
Interesting. Well, thank you to everyone who contributed today. Tony Wang, Chip, and Martin, of course, for contributing to our show with the emails that you sent in. And thank you for being along for Daily Tech News Show. The show is made possible by our patrons on patreon.com/DTNS. DTNS has a live version called DTNS Live on YouTube and Twitch. Find details on that and more on dailytechnewsshow.com. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
The DTNS family of podcasts, helping each other understand.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.